Hi guys, welcome to the video. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Zoe if you're new here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 10 books that I read in 2024. It has been a very long time since I have sat down to make a video like this. Honestly, too long. I've missed it a lot, but in 2025 we are back again with my YouTube videos. I'm so excited about it. And we are starting off with those top 10 books that I read in 2024. 2024 was a very scaled back reading year for me. I definitely read a lot less than I have in the past couple years, but that does not mean that I didn't read really great books. And honestly, even though I read less, I still had a hard time narrowing it down to 10. So I read 43 books in 2024, and today I'm just going to be showing you those top few, potentially with an honorable mention, and I tried to put them in the order of like least favorite to most favorite, so it ends with my top 3, but honestly, my opinions about these change from day to day, so just take this order with a grain of salt. But without further ado, let's just get into those top 10 books. So starting at number 10, I read this way back in January. I actually read this as I was working to set up my new Barnes & Noble store because, as I talked about in videos way back when, I did open a new Barnes & Noble in 2024, and this one was just very fitting at the time for how I was feeling. But I read Solitaire by Alice Oseman. This book is one that I've had on my radar for years. I had never read it, and I finally just sat down and did it, and it spoke to me in such a crazy way. Tori is like my spirit animal in a way, and I just felt that everything about this book was exactly what I needed in that moment. So this made it in the top 10 just because of how I connected to it. Coming in at number 9, we have one of my favorite authors ever. I'm actually about to meet her in a little over a week, which is insane to think about, but we have Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. Now listen, me putting this at number 9 is kind of crazy. If you know how big a fan of her I am, you might be shocked. But honestly, that's just because all of the books that I have in this pile right now are like all on the same level for me. So this is one where I just kind of threw it in at any spot. While I did just adore Jack and Emily and I loved this book so much, I still hold Practice Makes Perfect at the top spot in my heart. And also the rest of these books were just so fantastic that this one just kind of fell lower down, but still I adored it so much. The next one we have is kind of a shock actually. So I kind of had like my fiction era in the end of 2024, and I think it's still continuing right now, but this one I didn't really think I would enjoy too much, but ended up loving. We have The Frozen River. This book I read for like a little book club I have at work, and it's a historical fiction set in the 1780s, and it's about this midwife, and there's this trial going on, and she has to be there to kind of like defend women. Basically, it's very much like I Hate Men in the best way. And I just didn't know what to expect from this, but I ended up just loving it. It had the most beautiful romance, it had some mystery thriller to it, the historical romance, nope, the historical fiction was there, and I just really enjoyed it, and also found out at the end that it's literally based on a real person that was actually living at one point in time, so I found that really interesting. The next book I do not own a copy of, but we have The Measure. I read this earlier in the year, and this is one that I'd had my sights set on for a while. It's basically this book of when you turn 22, this box shows up at your door and it has a string in it, and the length of your string determines how long you're gonna live. You can do nothing to change it, but you can choose whether you want to open that box and find out how long your string is, or if you just want to remain oblivious. And sometimes ignorance is bliss, as we learn in the book, but also sometimes knowing is a pretty cool thing too. And I just really loved this book. It was one that had me really thinking hard, like would I open my box, would I not? It created a lot of fun conversations for me with coworkers and customers alike at work. And I really appreciated what this book did. I think the ending has very mixed reviews for a reason, but I personally thought it ended in a really great way, and this book just really stuck with me. I think I read it back in May, and I still think about it, so it had to make my top 10. Next up, we have one that took me a while to read, and this one fell on the list not only because of how much I enjoyed it, but also because of the nostalgia, like the memories I have of when I was reading it. So we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is one that I buddy read with my best friend Addie. She ended up finishing it, and I ended up setting it down 100 pages in. Kind of was like, I don't know if this is right for me right now. I might get back to it at some point. I might not. We'll see. A few months later, fast forward to September, I ended up going to visit my friend on the coast, and we had this day where we just sat outside and read, and I ended up getting back into this book kind of unexpectedly and was suddenly just like really gripped by it. I was really into it. I really wanted to read more. So when I drove home, I had like a 5-hour drive home, and I listened to the audiobook of this and finished it sobbing in my car, just sobbing. I thought this story was so beautiful, so well done. I feel like a lot of people, like, you either love or hate this book. I certainly fell in the category of people that loved it, and I cannot wait to read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern because I think her writing is just so beautiful. I think she tells the story so well, and it's very different from a lot of things that I've read. So I really, really enjoyed this one, and I'm glad I finally read it. Next up, we have a fun one. A lot of these that made the list were ones that I buddy read or that I read because I was told to. We have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This one is kind of like a mystery thriller, sci-fi, time travel type book. I honestly don't even want to tell you what it's about because I think the more blind you go into it, the better it's gonna be. But this book was incredible. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and I just could not stop talking about it for weeks. I recommended it to so many people. I got so many people to read it. I loved this book, and there's also a show for it on Apple TV. I only watched like half the show, but it was really well done, and I really liked seeing the book come to life. But this book, I'm not gonna say more other than you should go read it. It is fantastic, and I can't wait to read more of Blake Crouch's writing. The next book is one that I have wanted to read for ages, and I ended up listening to it on audiobook when I would go on runs because I ran a couple half marathons in 2024, so I would go on long runs and I needed something to keep my brain going, something to keep me from just thinking about pain and being tired. So I listened to Notes on an Execution. It was available on Libby one day, and I had wanted to read it for ages, and I decided to just pick it up. I didn't really know if I would get into it. I ended up finishing that book in less than 24 hours. I could not be stopped. I loved that book. I really loved the stance the author took on it. I thought it was so raw and so real. It really gripped my emotions in a lot of ways, and I have been begging people to read it ever since because I think it is such an important read, and I think it might be one of my favorites of all time, and I need to buy a copy of it because I loved it so much. And now we come into the top 3 of the year. Honestly, looking at this now, I'm kind of questioning these being my top 3 because talking about the other books made me remember how much I love them. But that's why I said to take this order with a grain of salt. But the next one we have is one that, again, I've wanted to read for quite some time. Finally picked it up. We have The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This book has always been interesting to me because of the cover. I really loved just like the blueberries. I found it very appealing, but I never wanted to read it because it was in hardcover. It finally came out in paperback in 2024, so I picked it up and I devoured this book. I loved this book so much. It is another historical fiction, kind of. It has another mystery aspect to it. It's basically about this family of berry pickers, and the youngest child in the family, who is 4, goes missing. They never find her again. And then you end up flashing back and forth from the past to the future, following 2 different characters and kind of just trying to figure out what happened to this little girl, and I loved it. It's another one that made me cry so hard at the end, which, like, if you know me, I don't often cry when I read, so to be crying over these books is kind of insane, but it means that it's a good book, I guess. It really got me. So that is my number 3. Honestly, maybe even higher. I adored this book. The next one we have is one that I bought kind of on a whim because I really love this author and I loved the cover. I didn't even know it was coming out, but I saw it at work, purchased it, read it immediately. We Have Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I love this cover. Can we just start with that? Like, it's such a pretty cover. I hope that's focusing. It's such a pretty cover. This is a very fun book to me because it is a fiction, largely romance though, based on this couple who just broke up, but you're following the whole relationship from the man's eyes. And I feel like so rarely in a romance book you follow something from the guy's perspective. So it was just a very fresh, different take on a romance, on a relationship, and I found it to be so gripping, so interesting. I really loved reading about this relationship and just seeing, it's just a very real life book. That's one thing about Dolly Alderton, is she writes very realistic pieces, and that's, I think, why I connected to it so much. So that is my number 2. And last but not least, we come to my number 1 read of the year. This one I don't necessarily think is shocking in any way. It had to make the list and it hasn't yet, so here she is. We have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is my favorite Abby Jimenez book so far. I thought it was fantastic. I actually need to reread it like yesterday, but this one is an interconnected standalone to Part of Your World and Yours Truly, 2 books that I absolutely adore. But the thing about this one is it really brought all 3 of the books together. You had this major jaw drop, shocking moment near the end where you're just like, everything makes sense now, and I feel you don't get that too often from interconnected standalone series. So I really loved that. Also, I just want to brag about this copy for a second because I got this. I didn't know that there were signed copies. I ended up ordering one, so not only is it signed, but I got one with Abby's dog's, I got one with Abby's dog's paw prints, which is something I've always wanted, and I'm just so excited about it because those are rare and hard to come by. So I really, really love this copy. I also have another signed copy that was like made out to me. I love the book, can you tell? Anyway, this was my #1 book of the year. I could go on and on about it. It's kind of surprising how little romance made the list for me because normally romance is basically all my videos are, but it just shows how great this one was because I was really in my fiction era. So anyway, those are my top 10 books. Really quick, I'd also like to give an honorable mention to The Good Part by Sophie Cousins. I love a Sophie Cousins book. This is the author who made me start watching the sunrise on New Year's Day, and this one was one that just really made you appreciate life. So this one stuck with me. It was not a favorite of the year per se, but it was a very important book to me. So I wanted to just include that super quickly. Okay, so those were all of my top 10 reads of the year. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed talking about it. It was such like a throwback to talk about those because in a way 2024 felt like the longest year. So I really enjoyed talking about them and I would love to just continue going on. But that's why I need to make a video about all my reads of 2024. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, like, follow, whatever. All of my socials are linked down below. I really am doing my best to get back into my social media game this year, and I'm very, very excited about it. And I would love it if you followed me along for the journey. So anyway, with that being said, happy 2025, happy new year. I hope you all had a great 2024, and I will see you in the next video.